Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 240Z of Retropower Uncut. And we're going to start with a big engine, because that's what I'm stood next to. So having mentioned it last week, we have actually received the engine now from Phil at Billy's Speed Shop. And here we have, for those that have not seen one before, a Chevy LT1 V8 and a Tremec T56 6-speed gearbox. It's actually got another name because it's there's a load of detail around Tremec T56s, and I can't tell you exactly all of the detail because I don't know it myself, but it is a T56 6-speed Tremec gearbox, which I've just finished bolting as a mock-up bolt on, so there's no clutch and flywheel in there at the minute. We have the clutch and flywheel. I've not put it in because if I fit it, I imagine by the time we come to put it in the car, we'll assume it's all done, and then we'll probably find the clutch plate is stuck to the flywheel. So I've decided to leave that out for the minute, and we'll have a note saying, remember there's no clutch in it, and then we won't have that problem. So we have, Tremec box connected to crate LT1 V8, and I've just been fitting the accessory drive parts to the front of that. This is a Holly aftermarket accessory drive, which moves the water pump to a central position. The water pump was over here, moves it to the central position, stops all this coolant paraphernalia sticking out so far off the side of the engine. It just tucks the accessories more neatly in on the engine, keeps everything tucked in quite nicely. It's just a very neat setup in general. There's a throttle body angular spacer bit to go on here to just tip that throttle body horizontal and stop that pointing down at the water pump drive, and a few other things. And then I've stuck some my lifting brackets on it so we could lift it up, picked it up, taken it off its little stand, stuck the bell housing on, stuck the gearbox on. The sump, I think we're probably going to change. Our CAD model of an LT1 had a different sump. I don't know my LT crate engines. I'm sure somebody out there probably watching this video will know the crate engines intimately and will tell me exactly what that sump's from. But I know that this engine was obviously used in a lot of different things, Cadillac CTS V amongst them, and Camaro being another one, so I don't know what that sump would be for, but it's different to the one that we had in the CAD model, and I don't particularly like a few features of it. I don't really like the oil return on the side of it, and the oil cooler on the other side is also pretty bulky. So I think we'll probably revise the sump and probably fit a Holly aftermarket sump. But I think it will actually physically fit in the chassis as it is. So we're probably going to do an attempt to fit with this sump on, and then ascertain the route forward from there rather than just jumping in straight away and putting the aftermarket sump on. But that's the likely route. I'm hoping we can probably use these headers, manifolds, whatever you would like to call them, exhausty outy bits. I'm hoping we can use those. They're a very nice piece actually. Interestingly, they've got cast stainless collectors on those, which look very nice, and the rest of the manifold's fabricated, but they've got a cast stainless collector, which looks a very neat thing. So hopefully we can use those. But yeah, there you have it. It's for those that aren't aware, it's a 6.2 litre push rod overhead valve engine, very similar to an LS series engine. However, these are aluminium block. Should add, again, it's very, very similar to the LS, but these have direct injection. So that's the major change between the LT and the LS. For those that don't know, I'm sure a lot of our audience will already know all this, but the main difference between the LS and the LT is that the LT is direct injection, and also on these engines, pardon me, displacement on demand system, DOD, was fitted, which a lot of people delete for various fairly good reasons. But yeah, they had a displacement on demand system fitted, where basically there are oil and electrically actuated actuators, for want of a better word, in the tappet chest, which basically control a set of 4 cylinders worth of the valves, so that you can drop cylinders out of operation without them acting as compressors to basically decompress those cylinders and switch the injectors off to those cylinders, and therefore run the engine as a 4-cylinder, which gives good, you know, on cruise can give good highway mileage, as our friends in the USA would say. The downside is there have been some reliability question marks over the DoD setup. I would counter that with the fact that this isn't going to be a high mileage vehicle, so I don't think the DoD will be a particularly detrimental thing to have in place on what's a vehicle that's not going to do massive mileages. I think most of the issues come about at higher mileages with the DoD setup, so we'll do a little bit more research. We could delete it, we could remove the DoD setup, but I have a feeling it might be just best just left alone on this. We're running a crate Chevy Performance controller package on this, so I would say it would probably make sense to just run it all as Chevy intended, and just treat it that way. I think that's probably a better way, likely to be more reliable, likely to be more consistent, and just treat everything as Chevy intended. It's generally been the best way to deal with these things when we fit them in cars that are designed for road use, cruise type use, not track use, nothing radical, not sports vehicles, just road cruisers. It makes sense to stick with the Chevy stuff. So moving on from that for a minute, we'll come back to, obviously this is the engine for, I should have picked up, this is the engine for the Aston Martin project. We'll come on to the Aston Martin project in a little bit when I can get back to that in the workshop. The moment we'll pause here because we're near these two. Briefly on the E-Type, once again we are still waiting on outside contractors for various things. We are waiting on the rear hubs still from Aston Equipment, who I believe they've subcontracted out the spark erosion of the internal splines on those hubs. I believe they're at the spark eroders this week, and hopefully we'll be back from the spark eroders next week, I hope. This is all hope, for the final machining, grinding and the external spline hobbing, at which point we should be somewhere near having a set of rear hubs. Just as a little rewind and reminder for those that haven't picked up on the project, the reason we need some rear hubs is we're fitting a later outboard brake rear suspension setup to this car, all using the Jaguar parts, all using Jaguar off-the-shelf parts. But one of the things that isn't Jaguar off the shelf is the fact that we're using wire wheels, and at no point did Jaguar ever make a wire wheel hub to suit the outboard brake type hub carriers. So that's exactly what we're doing. Aston Equipment are currently making us a pair of rear hubs to suit Jaguar fitment wire wheels that will fit the outboard brake XJ40, X300, X308 type rear outboard brake hub carrier. So that's what we'll be going into this, but we can't do the final wheel spec and fitment until we have those hubs to put in the car to physically measure and be absolutely certain on the positions of the mounting faces, well, the mounting tapers, I suppose, on those for the wheels, so that we can be absolutely sure before we do the final spec for the wheels to order the wheels, because we don't want to get those wrong because they're quite expensive. So that's what's going on there. Moving on to the front, which is the other area of progress, George has finished his design work on the HVAC system. He has finished 3D printing all of the trial parts for the HVAC and has trial fitted all of those successfully. He's actually waiting on, would you believe, some thumb screws, some of the internal screws. There's two screws that basically have to be fitted from inside the HVAC unit to hold it together, due to an inordinate amount of complication on how all of that lot goes together in almost no space. Two of the fixings have to be screwed in from inside by hand, and he's using some captive thumb screws that can't fall out. However, we're waiting for those. We thought they were a stock item. They weren't a stock item, so we're stuck on the final trial of literally every screw on that. However, I've had a look at it. I'm confident, everything seems fine. I don't think he's missed anything. It all looks like it's going to work. I can't see any problems. And yes, he's 3D printed all of the parts in PLA. So it's really a case of once that very final assembly with the actual screws and everything in place is done, then we can send all of the drawings to subcontract for SLS printing in a nylon powder material. I believe they'll be SLS printed. That's the plan there. So that's where we're at on that. Moving on to the other side of the front of the car, that's on the near side, passenger side. This is a right-hand drive car. Moving on to the other side, George is now working on the CAD work for the bulkhead area on the other side, which is the brake pedal box, basically, because the pedal box is only a single pedal in this because it's an automatic, so it just holds the brake pedal. The throttle pedal is now a floor mount BMW type pedal in this. I think it's either BMW or Audi, can't remember. I think it's BMW in this. BMW floor mount pedal, so it's only the brake that's pendulum mounted from its original type pedal box. Onto that is being mounted a compound reservoir which will keep the fluids for the brake system. It will have a breather tank for the engine, a breather catch tank for the engine. It will also have a screen wash tank. So he's making basically a section of the bulkhead there devoted to those tanks, those reservoirs, which will have a cover which mimics, hopefully, the HVAC arrangement on the other side of the bulkhead, so it gives a little bit of symmetry to the bulkhead and makes it look neat and tidy. So he's currently designing those tanks to sit on there and getting everything to sit in neatly, mount neatly, keep heat separated where it needs to be and not separated where it's beneficial, i.e. it doesn't matter if you warm up your screen wash, that's actually quite beneficial, but you don't really want to be warming up your brake fluid, so that's not beneficial. So doing things like that. The brake system on the car, just as a reminder for those not familiar with E-types, the master cylinder sits on the pedal box where the brake pedal is, as you would expect. There is a single circuit master cylinder there that operates a relay pipe that goes across the bulkhead. That relay pipe operates a slave master cylinder, if you like, a slave cylinder on the opposite side of the bulkhead, which is mounted to a remote servo bolted onto the chassis. And that remote servo stroke slave cylinder operates an integral dual circuit master cylinder. It's quite an interesting setup actually, because it's a bit different to most dual circuit remote servo systems I've seen where they use a double-ended servo. On this it's a single-sided servo with what looks like a fairly conventional dual circuit master cylinder, but it's got a third circuit on the front which is the slave circuit that operates it, and that's operated from the master cylinder on this side. So it's quite a neat setup actually. To be fair to Jag, that's actually quite a neat way of getting all of the components in not enough space, which is an ongoing theme with an E-type. So yeah, George is just managing all of the design work around that at the moment and piecing all that together, and he's doing pretty well actually. It's all coming together fairly well. There is just a lot of design work involved in doing it. Moving on from that, come over to Saab. Now, Bobby has been blitzing some new problems on this. As we were chuckling earlier in the week, he's gone from one set of problems to another set of problems. But interestingly, this morning he's kind of come up with a plan for solving some of them, and it sounds like a good plan. I can't see any major issue with that plan. I'd kind of given him a couple of ideas which actually haven't been that helpful, to be fair. I don't think they were unhelpful, but they didn't solve the problem. The first bit of fabrication work he's done is narrowing this mounting structure inside the car, which was the original dash mount, which also carries the HVAC unit. And as Bobby was explaining to me a couple of days ago, or yesterday possibly, it's very much designed for ease of assembly on the production line. So I've seen similar at car plants I've been to Toyota and Nissan. They have an overhead crane with a ability to swing inside the car, or a gantry arm that swings inside the car, and then they have a long sort of jib that basically carries the whole dash HVAC assembly and swings it into the car, and then there's a minimal number of fasteners to actually hold all that in the car, and that's how this was designed. It's very much a productionised car, which is unusual for us because most of the cars we work on are not that well productionised. This was, because it's an Audi S4, 2007 Audi S4, remember, that this is sat on. For those who haven't seen it, looks like a Saab, isn't a Saab, it's a 2007 Audi S4. The dash bar has been shortened on both ends because whilst we go basically using the standard mountings to the shell, Bobby's realised that if we use the standard mountings in the standard positions, we can't actually fit the dash bar properly into the space that it's got to fit into anymore, not once the Saab sheet metal is around it. So what he's done is actually narrowed the mountings. He's spacered the Audi end mountings inwards and then shortened the dash bar a little bit. I'm just looking at it now. Yeah, and then shortened the dash bar mountings a little bit so that there's actually room to get that in and out, which he's done a very neat job of. I'm just peering at it now. But yeah, he's done a very neat job of all that and got all that working very nicely. So that problem's solved. That bit's gone away. That's cutting quite a lot of work down into a very short synopsis there, but that problem is solved. He's then moved on to the wiper mechanism, and he's just doing some sort of working out now. Now, the Saab, I can't put my hand on it because it's fitted to the car. I'm going to put my drink down for a minute there. Put my Roundstone coffee, sponsory, down there. But yes, Roundstone very, very kindly let us have lots of coffee. So I will mention them fairly regularly on this because they're very kind, because they keep the cogs of Retropower turning. The wiper spindles on a Saab 900 attached to a outwardly fairly conventional looking wiper mechanism. However, interestingly, on the driver's side, right hand side, and I presume on a left hand drive car it would be the opposite way round, the wiper spindle actually goes through a approximately 120-degree arc, and it does that by being operated via a cable pulled drum, and it's an interesting setup. I'm not overly convinced by it, but equally you don't hear of them failing, so we've actually gone around the houses slightly and actually decided to stick with it and use it. Initially we looked at the whole setup and thought it's not great. We've got a bit of a problem in that it's clashing with the Audi bulkhead. We really need to move the motor to a new position. The Saab bracket is a cast Mazak, I believe. I don't think it's cast aluminium, I think it's cast Mazak bracket. Difficult to modify, and it doesn't kind of sit very well with the space we've got. Having gone around the houses a bit, I said to Bobby, let's have a look and see if we can find a mechanism where the motor is remote to the two wiper boxes. Basically, the two wiper spindles are linked by one link rod across the two cranks, and then the whole lot is operated by a separate motor with its own link rod driving those cranks. And interestingly, we found that a Mark V Renault Clio uses a really neat, simple setup with a pair of cranks on a straight tube with two cast holders, with a straight link bar joining them, and then quite a well-remoted motor with quite a long link rod operating that linkage. Looked quite a neat setup. So we've got one of those. It's only very cheap from eBay. That's turned up. We've had a look at it, and actually, whilst it's very close to solving the problem, it doesn't solve the problem. Everything's just not quite right to do it. So we've reverted. Bobby's had another scratch of his head this morning, gone back round it again and had another look and said, actually, you know what? We're going to use the Saab wiper boxes, if you like, the Saab crank mechanisms, the Saab crank mechanism mount and spindles, and that means that we keep the same arcs of rotation as the original Saab setup. It all mounts in a very similar way to the original Saab setup, so we can mount it all to the bulkhead. Everything that already worked still works, which is good, and then we're going to drive that either using the Audi motor, basically using one of the various wiper motors that we've got, probably the Audi wiper motor, which Bobby has here, and we're going to make a new, I think he's going to make a new bracket for that to mount that onto the bulkhead. And then once that's mounted on the bulkhead, then operate the Saab linkage using a rod from the Audi mechanism, which he brackets to the bulkhead there. So that's all coming together pretty well now. I can see Bobby's putting some brackets in place, which he's got clamped up here, just so that he can dummy up the whole assembly, get it all in position and work out how it's all going to work and make sure everything's going to function and get all the arcs correct, you know, just make sure everything's going to clear everything else, that the operating rods aren't going to hit things and that it's all going to work. Once he's got all that, he'll design the final brackets, put it all together, and we'll have a wiper system. So that'll be another step forward. So that's the wiper setup, hopefully developing to a pretty good extent on that. And at that point, I think we're going to go over to the BMW E9 and we'll have a quick look at that. So on to BMW E9, and Lots of visual progress actually. As you can see, things have changed quite dramatically. Now bear in mind this is all only temporarily fixed at the minute. It's all on Cleco fittings, screws, nuts and bolts, etc. But Stu's been pretty busy on this lot, as you can see. He's the large part of the time between the last video and this has been repairing the inner front panel, because that was a panel that we couldn't get as a complete assembly, and particularly the lower section, which you can't really see now, but I'm sure Jamie will have some footage of it. But the inner section that sits behind this valance that would hold the radiator normally, that section was very badly damaged. It was impact damaged, it was corroded, it just was in a bit of a state. And that was one of the few bits on the front that we couldn't buy. That and these two pieces here were the bits that we couldn't get hold of, because the front end assembly as a complete assembly used to be available, is no longer available. All of the panels are available separately from various, well, from the same one source, Wolof-Nesh, but these panels and the front lower section, the radiator support panel, were not available. So Stu's completely stripped that down, jigged it on the bench, cut out the sections that needed repairing, made a new lower section for it. The inner lower section is completely remade. The outer part he's reused most of it, but remade the rear ends, and then the upper part he's remade. This section you can just see poking over the top here, he's remade that all to the pattern of the original, then laid it all out on the bench, screwed it, sort of held it all down, screwed it down, clamped it down, and then welded it all together and got all that lot done. And then he has gone through the new panels, checked them as much as he can for shape, because this panel here, the actual nose panel that holds the badge sort of section, the grille and etc., had been quite badly flattened in transport. That was one of the few panels that had got a bit damaged in transit. It had got quite flattened. It's not a very strong panel, so you can see why it would easily get damaged. So we had to do a bit of straightening on that, get all that to sit correctly and in the right positions. Then he's gradually been piecing all of that lot together, making sure it fits the car correctly, getting it centered, getting all these various brackets and things cleaned up. He's been blasting brackets, cleaning things up and getting everything ready to assemble, and then got the quick fasteners in, the Cleco fasteners in, and the screws in to hold everything together. So he's just piecing all of the front end of the car together, because we can't really, all of this whole front end, the alignment of it all really depends on the outer panels now. So we need to get some wings in place and the bonnet in place to be able to align everything at that point. Everything hinges on everything else. And this is again where Stu's skills come to the fore from his sort of crash repair background, in that he's been there and done this sort of job quite a lot before, and kind of knows the root of what depends on what to line everything up. And to that end, he's now working on one of the front wings, which is, I believe, the better of the two wings that we've got. I think we are hoping that we may have found a source for a good used front wing for the offside. This is the near side, which is in considerably better condition. The one for the offside's in pretty poor condition. So we're hoping that we have got one of those sourced. It will need some repair, but it's in better condition than what we've got at the moment. This one definitely also needs some repair. But that's what Stu's moved on to, is getting the wings in a condition where he can get the wings temporarily screwed on as well. Then he can get the bonnet, line the bonnet up, make sure everything looks correct, everything sits centered, everything's right, and then he can start welding all the front end pieces together. As I say, rushing into getting that lot welded together and then finding that you've got the front slightly offset is a problem. So it's just making sure everything lines up, that the center line, because if you just measure everything from one corner to another and find centers, you'll find that you've probably got about 10 different center lines on the car based on all the different panels. What you've got to do is average all those out to a nice common center that looks correct with the outer panels in place. So that's what he's on a mission to do at the moment. That's all looking pretty good. And then on the mechanical front with this, I've literally just been messaging this morning again Tim Pollock at Classic BMW breakers, Classic BMW spares down near Northampton, because he has some of the bits we need. So we'll be picking up a couple of items from him next week that will enable us to put the final bits of the front end together. I don't know if we had mentioned previously, we were having a bit of a problem in that we're using E30 M3 front struts on this now, because they have a removable steering arm and lower pivot, which means you can alter the front roll centre very easily to suit different ride heights. So you can change the ride height dramatically without upsetting your suspension geometry and your steering geometry on the front. The downside is that the lower forgings, the lower pivots and steering arms are not very available. We were going to get some made. We'd actually got to the point of getting Andy, who does a lot of machining for us, to, in fact, no, actually, it might have been Jonathan. I lose track now who's actually doing that. One of our machinists to reverse engineer a set of those steering arms. However, at that point, we then discovered that KW Suspension, Cal discovered via some means, that KW Suspension actually make a complete E30 M3 front strut assembly with the bolt-on steering arm as a forged component. So I can only assume they've either commissioned a forging tool or got BMW's old forging tool. I don't really know. But they've got forged lower steering arm stroke bottom ball joint pivots, brand new, available as a unit from KW Suspension with the strut. So that's great. So the plan now is that we're going to get some KW front struts for it, which contain the part that we were struggling to get and solve all of our problems. At that point, we have all the bits we need to put all the front end together. That's great. Then the only other bit we're lacking really is the rear coilover assemblies to suit the E28 or E34. That's actually E34 rear arms we're using on this, on an E28 rear beam, with basically a combination of that era of BMW rear suspension parts. But the thing we need is the coilover strut to go onto that. So they're the only other remaining part we've got to source suspension wise really, and some anti-roll bar parts. But yeah, that's pretty much that in terms of all that stuff. So that's where we're at on E9. I think I'll stop waffling on that. We'll move on to back to the Aston, which obviously the body is lurking over there. The chassis is here, and we've made quite a lot of progress. Matt, particularly, has made a lot of progress on the rear of that this week. It's looking quite a lot more complex now, as you can probably see. I'll wander around to it. There have been a couple of things, I can't remember if I mentioned last week, that when we drew this, a bit of a joint error by me and George. It's not either one of our faults really, we just jointly made a bit of a blunder, which was that we forgot to put the actual size bushing in for the rear diff mount. We assumed a bush diameter because we didn't have one. George did the CAD around that at my request, and we both said we'll come back to that when we know the size of the actual bush. We then forgot to do that. So the allowance we made on the rear of the chassis was for a different diameter bush to the actual bush. So we had to make some modifications there. Wasn't a really major problem. The frustrating part of that was I had to machine the outer for the bush from an unfeasibly large piece of stock because it's a really large bushing, and the tube that's available, no particularly useful size of tube was available off the shelf in a small quantity to accommodate that. So I had to machine it from solid, which was a little bit boring, if you'll pardon the pun. It wasn't the most exciting job, but it's done, and that is that tube, which Matt's done a lovely job of TIG welding in. We profiled out some new pieces here to go around that, because again, the original had a much smaller accommodating piece for that bush because we'd made a little mistake on the size. However, given it's an entire chassis design, I think we can forgive one or two minor errors. The next stage, which was a reasonable technical bit of fabrication, was closing in this area under here. Again, in the CAD, George had allowed on this plate the clearance for the diff, but we knew that we were going to have to pocket out this piece of box section for that, and we all concluded that was better done once it was welded to these plates to keep that straight. So otherwise, if you cut the underside of that box out before it's welded to that, it'll curl. With it welded to these plates, that keeps it straight. So Matt's done that. Again, not nicest of jobs working under the car to do that, but we didn't have a lot of choice because it needed to be welded to the plates first. So he's done that, and then we did the, again, slightly awkward task of rolling a piece of 4mm thick steel, which we just used the fly press to bump it round, rolling a piece of 4mm thick steel to cap off that area underneath that hollow section there, just to close that in, and then weld on some mountings to the other side of the front diff mount to put them in double shear. So that's all done now. we're pretty much there. I think we're going to have a little mock-up of the rear suspension, make sure everything fits and everything looks right. We've got to pocket the top box section for the drive shaft. We may have to pocket the bottom very slightly, but we can't actually tell until we put the drive shafts in place. We can't actually tell the exact amount we need to pocket that area. So that's one of those things, again, you can simulate it in CAD, but until we have the actual dampers in place, we don't know to the millimetre the exact bump and droop travel of the suspension until it's literally in place on the car. So those are going to be pocketed to suit. And going back to what I was saying earlier, again, to pocket this piece of box section, if we cut a half circle or a part circle out of that box without it welded to anything else, it will curl. With it now welded to this plate on the top, that will keep it straight and prevent that curling when we take that bottom piece out to clear the drive shaft. So again, that's been done very deliberately to make sure that we don't curl the back of the chassis in doing that. We're going to have to do similar on this box here. Again, we're leaving that until we've got more car around it, and we will have to weld a brace onto this when we do this, but this is going to need some clearance in the top, I believe, for the prop shaft. We'll probably also put some clearance in for the exhausts into that tube again as well, but again, we want the body on before we do that. So that's where we're at on that. Front end is pretty much there. Again, talking of pocketing box, we've got to pocket the front as well for the steering rack, which again, we wanted to do when it's in situ, but I think we'll put the front chassis extensions that carry the front panel on before we do that again, so that we've got more to hold the box in place before we cut it and pocket it. So the next jobs on this really are finalising a few little nitpick jobs, having a bit of a tidy up, and then really it's going to be popping the engine and gearbox roughly in position, sit it on its mounts, prop the gearbox up in place on the jig, and then pop the body on and start having a look at the bulkhead. I think that's really the next sort of phase of events. Matt's just finishing off these torsion boxes on the front. We'd got these, you'd seen there was just a piece of box sticking out there. The actual full piece of fabrication is now coming together here, which is a piece of 4mm thick steel on the base with a lip here which will form part of the mounting that the floor is going to sit onto, and then this closes off that corner completely and basically all acts as a big torsion box, so that feeds the bending load across and into the end of these side rails, and then also to react that bending load. Once the bulkhead's in place, we'll have a brace that goes from the upper A-pillar area down to that front leg to, again, to react that front suspension load into the body shell. The downside on the Aston is that the upper body has almost no strength. I mean, the A-pillars on that are hopelessly weak, so you're pretty limited in what forces you can react into the upper part of the body. I mean, Aston did it. Aston had similar reaction bars going up into the bulkhead, but you know, the only thing above this height that can react force backwards is the cant rail, and the cant rail on that car is hopelessly weak. The top of it's been bludgeoned in the factory with a hammer to clear the aluminium, so I don't think it's going to be the strongest piece of metalwork in the world, but that's what we have to work with on this car, and realistically that's one of the reasons why we put a lot of strength into the chassis. I'm certainly aware that this is going to be a pretty heavy chassis. One of the reasons for that is we've got to get a lot of strength in very low down, because there's not really any strength in the body high up, so that's why it is how it is. Moving on from that, I think at this point we will nip into the body shop and show you a car which isn't looking all that shiny now because Gaz is getting on through the wet sanding operation and getting into the polishing stage. So we're XJC's looking pretty resplendent in its part wet sanded state at the minute, but yeah, Gaz is very pleased with the little starter gun trial on this. That's all gone well. Really pleased with how that went. Puts base coat on very nicely, very quickly. I think Gaz would be the first to say he's quite surprised by the rapidity of the. He's quite surprised by the speed of the base coat application. A little bit caught out by just how quickly it puts it on, but very even finish. Very happy with the base. What's the make of the base coat? I remember what this base coat was. I can't think what it's called now. I'm putting you right on the spot. We've used a different base coat on this. We've been using Max Mayer Aquamax for quite a while, and we were a bit aghast at the cost of the, you know, we're not here to cut corners on anything, but we were a bit taken aback by the cost of the particular base coat for this colour, as it was disproportionately more than what we would normally. Cinec. So it's a Cinec base coat on this, which is the first time we've used it, and we're really actually very impressed with it. Interestingly, talking to the SATA rep that was here helping us with the spray gun, he also said that a lot of places are using that he knows of and are getting on very well with it. As I say, we were a bit shocked, to be honest, by the cost of the tinter combination needed to make this colour with Max Meyer Aquamax, and it was just, you know, it was out of step with other colours that we've been getting from Max Meyer through the Max Meyer scheme, and it's just it's not a cost-cutting exercise, because, you know, these are cars being done properly. We're not trying to do it on the cheap. But it's just, yeah, it was literally twice the price, and for a product that is no better. So we've gone with the Cinec, and we're actually really, really pleased with it. There's certainly no downsides that we can see. Finish is exceptional. All of the tinters look spot on. The metallic and pearl late seem to sit perfectly in it. There's just nothing not to like, really. So yeah, it's just a painful bit, as Gaz would describe, of ruining it and then make it all look shiny again now, which is one of those things that we just have to do. So the next time you see it, I think a lot of it will be looking quite a lot shinier, but it's just a laborious process at this stage. It's continuation of the never-ending sanding. Product goes on, product goes off, product goes on, product goes off, and that doesn't even stop when you get to paint, because you put the clear coat on and then sand a load of it off again.
Scan it next week.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point actually. Gaz just reminded me that we're going to try and capture the shape, because the quarter panels on this car are a unique shape, because these wheel arches are not standard. We've raised these wheel arches by about 15 millimetres to standard. A bit of a collaboration with the customer's request, a slight redesign. We've did a bit of to and fro on how that design was going to look, and that's where we ended up. Just sort of for future proofing, really, in case there's an accident, we're going to get this scanned. So that we've got a digital record of what shape these quarter panels are, just in case in the future something happens, because otherwise there would be a bit of a loss in terms of how it should look, because they're actually quite subtle. It won't be very easy to copy them from a picture. They're quite a subtle difference to standard, so having a digital copy of it would make quite a lot of sense. Whether we try and tie that in to when we have the Libra scanner, we'll have to just see juggle the variables there, because it might make sense to try and do that with the Libra scanner as well that I mentioned last week, but we'll see where we go on that. I think at that point I've talked for plenty long enough, and it's time to hand over to Cal and let him take you through the assembly shop. See you in a week's time.
Well, right, thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to start in front of this gorgeous Jensen Interceptor. Adam is just starting the final chrome trial fit up. We trial fitted everything at Metalwork, and we're happy with everything then, but obviously with paint build up and the like, always best to be absolutely sure before we send all the chrome work off to be re-chromed, which will be going to Derby Plating, who we entrust with all our plating work. And in fact, on that subject, very shortly we will be sending all the parts for, well, probably 50% of the parts for Project Churchill to be copper plated, so they will be doing the process on that too. Now the chrome process generally starts with stripping any original chrome off the parts, so they're just bare steel, or in many cases brass. I should imagine most of the mouldings on this will be brass. And then they build up layers of copper and polish it back so you can get the imperfections out. If there's any kind of pitting or anything like that, they build it up and then kind of basically file or polish it back until it's nice and flat. And that is the thing that many chromers don't do very well, is the polishing part, because it's very easy when you're polishing a big component on a polishing wheel to get kind of the polishing wheel digging in and get ripples in it, and when you look along a long flat surface on a lot of chrome parts, you'll see it's kind of ripply, and Derby Plating just tend to get it absolutely spot on every time in our experience. So yes, they'll be doing that process, the coppering process on the Churchill parts, but then stopping at the point they're copper plated and polishing the copper, and that will be the final finish. Whereas on chrome parts, such as those going onto this, they will then follow that coppering process with chrome plate. So that's where we're at on that. We're also been gearing up to get the engine and transmission in, and there's a few hurdles to overcome on that. The long-term viewers will know this project had already been started elsewhere, and we received it with its engine and transmission in, but there were quite a few parts missing, and the transmission is missing enough parts that it isn't really worth us trying to source just those parts. So we have sourced a complete replacement Dodge Charger transmission for it, which is what it is. It's a ZF 8HP, I think, something like that. Somebody's going to correct me on that. Basically an 8-speed ZF transmission. So we've got a replacement one of those come in. We need to get a torque converter because that was missing. We've ordered the pulley for the power steering pump because that had been bent on the engine, so we're replacing that. And the capacitors from they bolt to the back of the heads there, basically the capacitors in the feed to the coils, which they were never there, so we've got a pair of those on the way. Yeah, it's kind of exciting to be at the point you're gearing up to get the engine and gearbox in a state to actually get in the car, and that should coincide with getting all the parts back for the subframes, all the powder coated bits, the diff, which Hauser Racing are building up in the minute. We've just been looking at gearing, and it took us a while to get our head around the gear ratios, because we thought, well, we'll look at a Dodge Charger because it's a Dodge Charger engine, it's a Dodge Charger transmission. The wheels are slightly smaller, the OD of the wheels, but we thought, well, as a starting point, because this is going to be a cruiser, it kind of makes sense to look at what gear ratios they used or what diff ratio they used. And it's a 2.6 or 2.62 off the top of my head, which to us seemed ridiculously tall geared. But we're not used to working on cars with 8-speed transmissions, and actually when you look at the transmission gear ratios, although it's got an incredibly tall 8, it's like 0.6 to 1, which gives it, I mean, if it could get to the limiter in top gear, which obviously it won't, it would be doing like 400 miles an hour or something, but it does mean it's essentially at idle speed when it's cruising at motorway speed in 8th gear. And actually, because there are so many gears, the lower gears are quite normal in their gear ratios. And it was a bit of a sort of eye-opener almost in terms of the fact that traditionally in something like with a 4 or 5 speed auto box, you'd expect maybe between 2.9 and 3.4, somewhere in that range. But it's always a compromise, because you're compromising having the ratios at a reasonable distance apart, not having an excessively tall first gear, but then the compromise is that your engine is revving out at kind of 2,000 to 3,000 RPM maybe at motorway cruising speeds, which is not a massive problem. But also in a massive torque engine like that, they can burble along at basically idle, 1,500 RPM, whatever it might be, at that sort of speed, no problem. So it's actually preferable to have that, as long as it doesn't mean that the rest of your gears are massively wide apart, which they're not, because there's 8 of them. So yeah, 2.7 I think is what we settled on in the end. We've just gone slightly shorter, and we've got slightly smaller tyres, so it'll be slightly shorter geared than a standard Dodge Charger. But yeah, that's where we're at with that. Allegro. Various finishing off bits in the engine bay. They finished off the engine management wiring harness now. They've just been doing the breather plumbing, the fuel plumbing. They've got oil in it. They've got, I believe, coolant in it. Alex has literally just gone out the door to get a can of fuel. George has finished the fuel filler neck. So I think they're getting fuel in it, and I think, though I don't want to tempt fate, they might be going for first fire up either later today or tomorrow. So very nerve-wracking moment, but yeah, also potentially a very exciting one. So that's where we're at with that. The Camaro, I'm going to shoot around here because the Camaro looks absolutely awesome just sat here. It's been on the ramp for ages, and when they're on the ramp for ages, you forget how cool they look when they're actually on the floor at their stance, their final stance. So I've got this down so I can start getting some of the interior together. You saw, I think last week or the week before, I was going through doing the PDM program, testing everything electrically, happy with everything there. It's obviously all strewn everywhere at the minute, because there was no point in putting it all together finally, only to find there might be some wiring diagnostics to do, but everything was good, so I can start piecing that together now, get the console all built up, get the instruments fitted in that, get all that neatly into place. The dash top can be fully fitted now. The rear seats can all go in, the A-pillars can go in. I can basically piece together all the rest of the interior, which you saw Richard doing ages ago. And then we're getting extremely close, I think, at that point to being at the point of road test. One thing we are doing is a slight change of plan on this. I wanted to do a warning light module in it, and we were originally going to do it on the top of the column, but there isn't really enough room to get it in there. So I designed Luke had designed a little pod to go on top of the dash. But at the time, I thought it looked a bit afterthoughty. My fault, because that's what I asked him to do. And then I looked at it again the other day and I was like, I really don't want to go down that route. It just looks too much of an afterthought. So I've looked at it again and realised that I think we could make a really cool set of 3 little pods that go onto the original dash fascia. So you've got the 2, it's a really angled towards you dash fascia with 2 instruments, the speedo and the Sacco, kind of slash cut into it. And I think we can design some little sculpted pods, one in the middle with 3 warning lights in and one on each side with 1, that will kind of look much more in keeping with the original dash. So I've got Luke just 3D scanning that so we can do that as one final thing before all that fascia goes in. And then the machine bonnet pins and the retaining washers and bezels for those have been done. Andy's holding fire on posting them because he's posting them with the Churchill air vent bezels, which he's just machining. And that will allow us to get that all wrapped up. So yeah, also, you might notice a lot of cars coming together all at the same time, so high stress levels for me, including Project Kuma, which I was out doing some more road testing in this week. Pretty happy with that. Jamie's just tripping over things, kicking stuff across the floor and then frowning at me like I'm saying things that are not true. Anyway, out in Kuma, really successful continued road testing in that. Really happy with it. The last time I went out, there was one more little Alex was like, I think I want to go out one more time just to do a few more revisions. And I was like, okay, yeah, but let's not make it, for too long. And I'm glad we did go out because we did notice I suddenly had a drive-by-wire fault in it. So I kind of went to accelerate, throttle didn't open, came off, went back on, was fine again. Did it a couple more times, so we pulled over and found that the limp home module on the Genv fly-by-wire throttle motor had wound itself out, which basically threw the ECU into disarray because it wasn't receiving the throttle position it was expecting to see, essentially. Now what that module does, I've probably mentioned this before, but it's quite a useful one if you're doing drive-by-wire using a Genv throttle motor. It's pretty much essential that you have what they call their limp home module, which is basically a sprung plunger that you screw into the body of the motor, and it holds the throttle essentially open in a certain position on a sprung plunger, such that when the throttle, when you turn the car on, the throttle motor has to pull the throttle back to get your idle position, and if you cut the power to the motor, the sprung plunger pushes it to a certain point, so, which is your kind of limp home idle. So you could set it to like 2,500 RPM maybe, which means you can still drive if you get a power failure to your throttle motor. But when it's all working as it should, the motor just pulls against the sprung plunger, which not only has the function of the limp home, but is also extremely good because there's quite a bit of backlash in the gears of those throttle motors. And what you'll find trying to do idle programming with them is that the backlash really makes the ECU struggle with the idle control because it'll try and do a little movement of the throttle to increase the idle, and all it does is take the backlash out in the gear, so it does a bit more and then it overshoots and then you kind of end up with a hunting idle. So the plunger also serves the function of holding the backlash in the gears to one side of their play all the time because they're being essentially pre-tensioned by the fact that the motor is having to pull against the plunger to pull the idle down. So yes, top tip. Anyway, on that note, and talking about Project Kuma, we're going to go down the den, but have I got to do a handover to the design crew in the meantime? I have probably, haven't I? So we're not going to go down the den, despite me teeing myself up for a beautiful transition from talking about Project Kuma here to talking it down in the den. I'm going to intersect that with the CAD den. Here's the guys.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the ADHD Attic. I'm going to kick off talking about my lovely microphone here because it is actually relevant to what I'm about to say. So, since the departure of somebody from Retropower, there has been a gap in a smaller job role that we have here to do with the CNC routering that we have going on downstairs. Now, beforehand, we actually haven't been doing too much to do with that because we just haven't had the time, really. But one thing that we have done on that consistently is the diamond foam kind of cutting out. Previously, we had the trim guys doing that by hand, and it was taking forever, and we were like, well, we have this downstairs, why not use the tools that are disposable to get this done quickly? So, end of last week, just literally like the last hour of Friday, I had a look through the program that we had previously for that. It did work, and it worked completely fine, but it took forever because it was cutting out each individual diamond as one piece and then moving on to the next diamond. So what I did is I changed that so it just literally cuts it in rows. So it does all the horizontal rows in one direction, up, down, up, down, up, down, and then goes back down the other horizontal direction to do the other ones. We had the foam come in yesterday for that. So honestly, within the next few days, we'll be cutting that out, and it will be my first time doing any sort of CNC machining. So I'm very excited, even though it's a really simple program. Moving on to the Allegro now, just a small bit on that, the intake piping for that. So I did the indicator intake design on that. It houses a little motorbike indicator in it, looks really cool. It's a nod to kind of like the original indicator position, and that's been in the car and prototype for a while now. So George is now, along with putting on the ITBs and the airbox on that, figuring out the intake ducting from that. About halfway between the airbox and where my inlet ducts are, there needs to be some sort of bracketry which kind of supports that flexi duct in the right position. Along with supporting that flexi duct, it also has to have a little spigot on it for the breather from the engine. So what I've done is I've done a carbon printed bracket. It's quite beefy so it doesn't flex around or vibrate in the engine bay, which comes off from where the kind of like front shock towers are on the in the engine bay. Comes out into the engine bay, supports that pipe, and has a little box on the bottom which can be tapped out for an adapter that we can then put the breather pipe on. And then I think that's it for the Allegro. And then moving on to the E-Type, at the end of last week I mentioned the flip up number plate, something I was really excited for, because first time like dabbling in like, what do you call that? It's not electronics. Mechatronics, I think is the big word for it. First time kind of like dabbling in that, even though again it's a relatively simple thing, but when it's your first time and you see something go it's incredibly cool. So that is in, it works, and we're relatively happy with that. Had to do a slight tweak to the rear light housings to make sure that we can get that bar in, but that's done now. Cal just needs to have a look at that, and then they can get made as well. And then I believe I'm probably missing something, but that's all for the Retropower side of stuff, because I've been doing a hell of a lot down at the Den. I think I mentioned at the end of last week's video as well that we had the Morris back down at the Den though, for it's kind of like 1/2 year checkup after the clients had it for a little while. One thing the client did mention is that with how the wheels poke out the front, he was getting a lot of stuff kind of flipped up along the back of the car. So I've done a stylized mud flap design which doesn't bolt through the car, because obviously we don't want to be drilling such a lovely car. Kind of clamps around the inner flange of the wheel arch, and then clamps around the just outside of that wheel arch with about 6 bolts. It's not going to go anywhere. That's ready for prototype now, so I'll get that on the printer as soon as possible, and that can be sent off. Also on the Morris, the client was... It's not that we didn't waterproof them. The client was just concerned that in the rear wheel arch, where the rear lights come through the back of the body, they are waterproof, but that's still going to get hammered with quite a few stones and just general road detritus. So he has asked us to do some sort of like cover shielding for that. So what I've done is I've done 2 bonded on mounts, and then a nice stylized cover plate which just kind of sits over the light and stops anything from being flicked up and causing any damage to that. So again, that is done. Cal's had a look at that, he's happy, so that's ready to be prototyped as well as soon as we have printer time. And then I think again that's it for the Morris, I'm going to say. So then moving on to the lovely Mini that they have down there. Really cool story on that. The guy's done all the work himself and it is flawless. It's in for an inspection at the minute, and then I don't know if it's going to have any other work from there, because I don't know if it even needs it. It's honestly really, really nice. One small thing that I did have to do is where the owner cut the carpet for the steering column, it was cut wrong originally, and so there was a hole about like 50mm lower than where the actual steering column comes through. So what I've done is a little cover plate, one half of it sits under the carpet, the other sits over it, and then it just clamps through that hole down to kind of cover that. Looks in keeping with the pedal design, and you wouldn't know that it wasn't a so-called factory piece from the beginning. So that's it on that, because as I said, that's a mint car and I'm not even sure I'll be touching that car again. And then moving straight onto the Quattro, a couple of small jobs in terms of like the bumper brackets for that. So they just literally needed some L-shaped brackets. Quick measurement job, measure your bolt hole distances, measure from the top of that block to where the bumper sits, and then do your L brackets backwards far enough so that when the bonnet comes down it covers the bolts. That's all good. That's with Gaz, who is painting that now, as well as doing a bit of like final processing work on the Allegro interior for me, so they can go over to the den soon. And then the bigger job on that Quattro is it's had a new gearbox in it and a new shifter. That needs mounting and probably the center console adjusting. So over yesterday, what I did is I drew up the mounting box for the shifter, the plate that sits on the front of that to hold some form of boot to go around that, and then the shifter column from that point forward, and then figuring out the kind of sheet metal that needs to cover up the gaping hole in the center console so you're not getting like, I don't know, road leaves and shit flicked up at you. Sorry, I can't swear. Road leaves so flipped up at you in your face whilst you're driving. And I think that is it, probably. So I'm going to hand off back downstairs, I believe. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, thank you very much, guys. And now we are going to go down the den, and I'm going to show you Project Kuma, which is looking spectacular. Welcome back to the den. And next to me, in this beautiful detailing booth, is an equally stunning car, Project Kuma. And this is obviously the first time we've had it fully polished up. Chris has just been doing an amazing job of the detailing on it, done all the final machine polishing, everything ceramic coated externally, gone to town on all the engine bay, interior, just a clean, but a super detailed clean. We're steering clear of too many coatings on the interior on this, and it's just looking amazing. I love it when we get to this stage, because we've seen them in various stages of being covered in dirt and dust, and then it goes straight from the workshop to being on the road testing, plastered in bits of polythene and getting generally covered in cow muck and God knows what else. So the moment when you see it all together and clean like this is just absolutely stunning. So I think probably worthy of a quick montage. Awesome. And actually, I'm going to do a more detailed walk and talk around this car, but we'll probably post it on our Instagram as an Instagram reel. So if you want to go onto our Instagram at Retropower Cars, in the next few days, I'll get a reel up on there with a detailed deep dive, as they tend to call them on these things. But yeah, what a stunning thing. And speaking of stunning things, my BMW E30 Touring. So you'll have seen this generally in the background in some videos and various people mocking me for the lack of progress, and rightly so. And as is often the case with me, I leave things to the last minute a lot. I will be driving this, fingers crossed, to Poland at the end of the month for Ultrace, which is a very cool car show in Poland, which I've never been to before and really want to. So yeah, I'm kind of doing the bit of a push now to try and get it ready for that. And I've just changed the alternator, new auxiliary belt, all the tensioners. I have got to change the fuel tank annoyingly, and I have one on the way. I'm just hoping, fingers crossed, that arrives in reasonably promptly. I've got a new fuel pump ready to go in that, because basically the whole fuel system needs sorting out because it's just been sat with stale fuel for ages. James has very kindly upholstered my headlining panel, which has been loitering around Retropower HQ getting in the way for about 2 years at least. So I'm in the process of putting that back in, which is why it's hanging down there. He's also upholstered the pillars. Chris has done the detailing, which wasn't actually, I think I mentioned this last week, it wasn't planned for now. I was going to do that right at the end, but he had a dead spot in the schedule. So got this in, machine polished all of this, ceramic paintwork on it. Still got the interior to go through when the rest of that's in to clean all that up. But fingers crossed, big push to get this done. And anyone who's going to Ultrace, if you see me, come and ask me whether I managed to get there in this car or not. It's also my birthday on the 28th. I'll be at the Ultrace night experience on my birthday evening, probably with a lot of alcohol inside me. So if you want to buy me a birthday drink, then please do. That is that. And I'm going to hand over to James to see what's been going on upstairs.
Hi, welcome back to the trim shop. As you can see by the list behind me, we are stacked at the minute. We've got about 10 cars we're working on. So yeah, we are stacked. You've seen last week that the Golf headlining was done. That was behind me last time I spoke. So we've cleaned that off, glued it up, that's gone back in, that's really nice. Hopefully the car's going today. So that's all good. You may have seen a bit of Cow's BMW that we're doing. So that's another headlining. That's basically destroyed the floor in here with the sticky foam that's come off it. So that was a bit of a nightmare, but the headlining's done on that. Driver's seat's done. Passenger seat just needs a bit of work. But the main thing we've been doing is the Quattro. So we've got the Quattro doors. We're just going to put a little insert there just to make it a bit more nicer than a race car. So we found some old Quattro material, which has got some stripes on. Then on the seats, it will say Quattro down a strip down the middle of the seat, so that would be really nice. Customer's happy with that, he's okayed the material. The dash, this was flocked, so we've sanded all the flocking off. There was some vents here that we've filled and sanded, so that's smoothed, and then patterned it. That's going to be ready for Ellie to machine tomorrow, hopefully, and then I can fit that, and that'd be nice to see done. Also on that is the door cappings, and we've got a few bits here where it's just the binnacle, the glove box, a few other bits like that. So that's coming on really nice. Hopefully that'll be done by the end of the month. So that's another one that can go. The Mercedes 500 outside, that's starting to strip. So the leather should come for that next week. That's a full interior as well. So that's ongoing. Hopefully you should see some progress on that. Maybe not next week, maybe the week after. Allegro carpets, you've seen the brown set is bound, glued, ready. So I hopefully might get that in tomorrow. The blue one is cut, ready for Ellie. Ellie's going to come and hopefully do that as well tomorrow. So we've tested them in the orange car and they seem to fit really well. So fingers crossed both cars are the same and we can just go ahead and get them ready for the both cars. And then there's Churchill, you've seen the foam that's arrived for that. So hopefully they'll get that on the router, get the diamonds done. And we can get the leather and the diamonds machined for that, and then we can look at fixing that up. So that would look really nice. And yeah, busy, busy, busy. So we'll crack on. Thanks, and I'll hopefully see you next week.
Thank you, James. I'm going to ping straight over to Nick and see what he's been up to.
Hello, thank you, Cal. Welcome back to the Den. Me again, I am back. A couple of bits of housekeeping. I've not been killed, and Luke has not been sacked. And also, I just want to say a big thank you to Marion and Tom, who popped in to see us a few weeks ago, and I forgot in the video after that, so I apologise, but they popped over. They're on holiday from South Africa over in the UK and in Europe, and their first stop from the airport was to come and see Retropower and Den. So we're very grateful to them for that. Thank you very much. Okay, so the Lupo engine and gearbox are back in the Lupo. We've also done a few tidying up bits. So we fitted a new brake master cylinder and reservoir because it was leaking. So we've got that in there while we had easy access. All the brake lines are done together. Brakes are bled up. So Luke is just working through the engine insulation, getting them all back together nicely. And good progress on that. I think we talked about the radiator is done. A few other bits and bobs, so that's all coming together. So hopefully next week we'll be able to see that running, which would be quite exciting. Moving on to the Mini, lots of comments about the Mini. A lot of people sort of saying, why is it so, if it's so good, why is it here? Well, the customer has built this from the ground up in his garage at home, and he basically wanted a sanity check, and there's a few jobs he couldn't really do at home that he wants us to have a look at, so we're doing those for him. But genuinely, this thing is absolutely incredible, it's stunning, and all credit to the owner for the job he's done on that. We'll talk about a little bit more about that next week with the work we do as and when we do it. The rusty escort's in there being cleaned. Cal will talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Lexus because we have started, or we're about to start, the Lexus IS300. I think it's a sport wagon, they call it, the estate. So this is an existing Retropower customer. He basically wants a new daily to go on his commute into London and back. So he's had one of these before, he really likes it. So essentially what we're doing is a mechanical restoration in essence to make sure the thing is going to be reliable, usable for a good number of years to come, so we can use it, enjoy it. We're going to be upgrading the audio on it to something a bit more contemporary. The screen on it, it's a 2002 car, so the screen, it's got a really cool flip up screen on the dash, but the resolution is kind of like, I don't know, like 4 pixels or something in it. It's not great, so we're going to be upgrading that. We're going to try and get a screen into that existing flip up mount, flip up like screen, so it kind of keeps it looking really OEM. We're going to retrim the front seats. The car is actually going to have a full paint job over at Retropower, so Owen's just started taking off the bumpers. There's a few things we just need to address to get working. One of the headlight washers is broken, so we just got that all. We can make sure we've got all the right bits for that. And then the car will go over to Retropower, get painted, come back in a few weeks, and then we can start with all the mechanical bits on that. So we'll be able to keep you up to date on that, but we're quite excited about that because it's a really low mileage car. Well, for its year, I think less than 90,000 miles. It's a Toyota engine, straight 6, 3 litre. It's the 2JZ, I believe it is, which is actually the same engine that went into Utah, which I'm sure you all know about. So yeah, I mean, that's bomb-proof really, the engine. Electrical stuff generally is bomb-proof. So it's more the mechanical stuff that we're going through on that at the moment, just to get all that tip-top for him. Quattro's ongoing, so Owen's been doing a load of stuff on the Quattro, little odds and sods, and James is starting to look at some bits of interior. We're just tidying up the interior, which way we're going, doing a dance, royal dance. Some bits on the interior just to make it slightly more, or should I say less race car when he's on the road, because he does use it on the road occasionally as well. The MGF, we've got some good progress on MGF. Again, Owen's been on that, doing service bits on the engine, the gearbox, giving them all a really good tidy up and a clean up. And we've got the customer coming up next week with some parts. He's got several MGFs and TFs, So he's going to bring up a load of parts that he's accumulated over the years, because he's had this from brand new as well as another couple of other cars. He's going to bring some parts up, and we're basically going to have a Bewley Auto Jumble in the workshop and just pick out what all the good bits to be able to put on that, which is excellent. Under here is the Golf. The Golf is going. Customer's super excited. Luke, it's not yours. No, it's going back. It's going back. Cal's E30 is half a headlining in. Still doesn't run, but interesting kind of 50-50 mix on which was the cooler car. I think I'm probably just biased because the Evo's mine, but in no doubt this is a super cool car, and I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan. Workshop stuff. So next week we'll be midway through installing a new ramp. So we're having a new 2-post ramp right here where the Alpha is at the moment. And to be able to fit it in, we've just cut out a small section of the mezzanine above. Otherwise, you can only get a really short car on there. So the ramp is arriving this time next week, and we shall get on with installing that and wiring it up, and then we'll have another ramp, so we can maybe not take on more work yet, but we'll have more capacity in general to be able to get through some more stuff. I think that's it from me. The Rusty Escort Project Kuma, obviously you know about. Chris is detailing that. He has his own YouTube channel, which is Foxtail Detail, so go and have a look at that. And he's got his own videos of him doing his stuff on that, which is fascinating. If you're a nerd like me, it's fascinating, so go and check that out. That's all from me. We'll see you next week. Take care.